Okay, welcome back everyone. Today we're gonna continue on our HTTP server. We have done 2 lectures about this already, and we have gone quite far with the code. We have created our main function, so we are listening in for HTTP connections, and when we receive a connection, we are forking, so we can handle several of these connections at the same time. And then we run this command, client connect. We pass in 2 file descriptors, one for the server and one for the client. So, what do we do next? We listen and we read from the socket and let the client send its HTTP request, which looks something like this: get, and then a slash and a file, and then the HTTP version that we're gonna accept. So we have created a successful parser that takes this method and this URL and it puts it into a structure. And the structure is up here. So it's the HTTP request structure containing the method and the URL. And we have typedef this to HTTP rec. Okay. Today we're gonna use that information in order to create a response from the server, and we're also gonna set up the routing, which means that we will handle the different URLs. So I will open up this file with Vim instead, and we will continue where we ended last time. So first the client connects, and then it uses the client read to read a section of the code, and then we parse the HTTP request. So when this is done, we are currently just printing it on the screen, but we're going to remove that part. And instead we are going to handle these different routes. So the easiest way would be to create an if statement. So we could do something like this: if string compare, and then the request method. So we compare that to get, and then we'll just do a logical OR operation, and we'll run another string compare, this time against the URL part of the structure. And we need to replace this dot with an arrow because we are talking about pointers here. So something like this, and we can compare this to something like app and web page or something. So that's one way of doing this. I think we're gonna start doing like this, and then we might build on to this server by instead parsing an array containing the different methods along with the different routes and a callback function. So it would look something like this. We have the method, and then we have the URL or the route, and then as a third part of this array we could have a callback function. So this callback function is triggered when this method and this URL is the same as the requests method and the requests URL. But we'll do it a little bit easier at this time. So if these match, if we have the get method and we have that /app/webpage as a file, then we'll do something like, we'll just send back a header response for now. So let's do a void function that just send, no, we don't need send, we can call it HTTP response. And then we select the response code. 200 means everything okay. And we don't need more than this. We'll send the socket file descriptor to it. And then we can do something like let's change this to HTTP header. And this will be HTTP response. And here we'll send C and we'll send a string. So we can define that statically for now. I will create a pointer for that. Let's call it response res, and we'll set that statically to something on the BSS. That's the memory part where all these statically defined strings are ending up, the read only part of the memory. So let's say we are sending something like this: HTML hello world. That will be correct. And we can put this inside of here instead. No, not there. Here is good. And we will send the res like this. And that will be enough. We will close the connection. We will free the request, or let's not do that, by the way. We already have the code for that here. We don't want to repeat ourselves. This should be it, I think. And if we get anything else than this route, we will instead send HTTP headers C and 404. That means, let's type it like this: 404 equals file not found. And we'll do it like this: 200 är lika med equals everything okay, like this. I think the colors looks a little bit odd, but maybe that's just because we have a number here. Because I have all the parentheses correct, right? This is for this, and this is for this, and we don't really need to put this inside of that. Okay, so this is for that, and this is for the whole shebang, and everything else looks quite okay. Let's also change the res to something like file not found. perhaps we need to set the MIME type, the content type as well, but we'll wait a little bit with that. So something like this, and then we'll save. So we need to create these two functions, the HTTP headers and the HTTP response. And if we begin by the HTTP headers, we took two arguments, the socket file descriptor for the client and the code. I'm not sure if we should call this HTTP headers. Let's do that for now. Okay, so void HTTP headers. Did I say it in singular or plural? Headers, it should be headers. Void HTTP headers, and we have int c and int code. And what are we going to put inside of here? We need to grab a server response. So let's use the first code we did. It was sockets.c, because this connects to a HTTP server. In this case it's yahoo.com, and it sends a HTTP request, the head method, and then it prints out the response. So we can use that to get a template for our headers. So let's take this one and we'll go into our directory and open our file, and I will just paste this before like this. I will do something like that. Okay, so what do we have here? We have a couple of these headers. And I think we can use a lot of these, but not all of them. The content length, that will be our other function, I think. Okay. So let's do something like, we'll create a buff 512 big, and then we'll just, the easiest way I think would be to use the SN. Let's memset this first. I like cleaning out the buffers before I use them. And then we'll use the SN printf. That writes into a variable like buff. We set the max size. And then as the third argument, we set what we want to print. So if we'll just mimic this one at first, I will add all these. Oops, it should be there, and there, and there, and a couple more. This, and this, and there. All right, and at the end we will put the new line character as well as the ending quote sign. This way we can just change what we want to change. Like this. Okay, so we can keep this protocol part of it, but we'll change this code. So we'll put a %d over there, and the date, well, that's not really necessary. Let's remove that for now. Server, that's the name of our HTTP server. Let's just call it http.c for now. And cache control, we can keep that as is. Content type, here we have it. I think we will do the content type in the next function. Yes, let's put that as an argument for our HTTP response part. So as a second argument, we will just say text HTML. That's the correct one, right? Text HTML, yeah, that's right. And in this case, it's not the text HTML, it's just text.txt or something like that. Let me just check that out real quick. Content type ASCII text document. So, okay, text plain is the one that we're looking for. So, text plain, like this. And we need the comma sign as well. Okay, so we can wait with this part. I will just cut that off and put it down here inside of a comment. Oops. We'll need to do like this now. Okay. We have it in the comment up here. So no harm, no foul. And the content language, we can keep English. Expires, we can keep. Same origin, we can keep. And content length, that depends on the actual length that we're sending. So we'll wait with this one for our next function instead. So the only thing that we change in this header is the HTTP response code. So at the end here, we just put in that code variable like this, and we need an int with the length. So we'll set the n to, and then we use the string length in order to count the characters in this headers. So buff, then we write to our socket file descriptor, we write the buff, and we set the length to n, and then we return. Okay, that ought to do it. In HTTP we need to end with 2 of these new lines, but we'll do that in the other function instead. So remove this, we save, and then we'll jump right onto the other function, which is called HTTP response. So void HTTP response, we send the C, and we have a char pointer for the MIME type, let's call it content type, and then we have a char for the data, like this. And we'll basically do the same here as we did in the other one. We create a buff, we create an n variable. We memset the buff with 0 as usual. Then we do the sn printf to the buff 511. And what do we put in here? So we need this content length part. I will change the different parts of it in a while. And we need this content length as well. And then I'll put a new line here. And the next line I put the additional new line. And then we have the data. And let's end that too with a new line like this. And we will change this text HTML to %s. The content length will be a D. Should be a D. Okay. And we can reuse this n variable for that. So first we count the data, because that's what we're gonna have as the content length. So the first argument, that will be our content type variable. And the second is our content length, that's the n. And the third is our actual data, like this. Okay, so now we don't need that n, so we can reuse it. And this time we will count the buff variable. Then we will write to the socket file descriptor the buff with a size of n, and we'll return. And we'll clean this up a little bit. We don't need these comments. Okay, to wrap up a little bit what we have done this far. So all the parsing was done before. We just do a simple string compare to compare the method. And we do, okay, we shouldn't do a logical OR here. We should do a logical AND operation. Both of these need to be true. Okay, so first we check the method, then we check the URL for this route. If both are true, then we set the data to this HTML and we send the 200 OK header, and we send the data together with the text/HTML content type. If this if statement is not true, so in the else statement we set the data to file not found in just regular text. We send, okay, it seems like we mixed this a little bit. This is the, let's see, HTTP headers. This is the HTTP response. And there we have the file descriptor and the content type, and this should be the response data, like this. And let's get rid of this. And before that we will send the HTTP headers. And here we'll send the socket file descriptor, and here is the 404. So 404 equals file not found. This time we got it right, I think. Then we free this request data structure. We close down the client connection, and we return from this function, and essentially from the whole process. Okay, so what do these functions do? If we begin with the HTTP headers, we allocate a buff and an int variable. We clean out the buff with 0. We put in this HTTP code and some static headers. We calculate the length. We write it to the socket file descriptor. And the HTTP response we begin by the same way. Here we measure the data length, and then we use that to the content length header, and the content type we send as a char pointer as an argument to this function. Then we recalculate the length this time based on the buffer. We send that to the socket file descriptor and we return. Okay, so let's see if this code compiles. There's probably a couple of errors that we need to tweak. No, it worked directly. Let's see if the code actually works. We will create this on port 8081. And let's use Safari in order to surf into this one on port 8081. And this time we'll just write something like this. We get a 404 file not found. Okay, so let's see what the correct route was. If I'll just do a more on this code C and http http.c, it should be /app/webpage. Let's try this one out. So same port /app/webpage. Hello world. And if we do a inspect element, so here is the HTML code, and it's correctly parsed by the browser, which means that we got all the headers right. And I think we will be able to see the headers somewhere here in the settings. It does work like that anyway in Google Chrome. I'm not really sure about Safari. Let's click around a little bit here. So sources, network. Here's the code headers. Here it is, I think. Status, source. Okay, we don't see much. But obviously it works, because this is rendered as HTML. So what have we learned today? We have learned how to create routes in the HTTP server, the modern cloud-like way of doing things. We have created two functions, one that sends the HTTP headers and one that sends the HTTP response. And we make sure that it's correct content length, content type, HTTP response code, and so on and so forth. Okay, thanks for watching and thanks for today.